Last week, we studied the elements of art and the principles of design. It is now time to take what we learned and apply some of them to our next studio project. The element of art we're going to be focusing on is line. This is the most basic visual element. Before we start taking a look at lines, I want you to think about two questions. Are lines always straight? And what happens when we repeat a line over and over again? A line is a path made by a moving point through space. It is one dimensional and can vary in width, direction, and length. Therefore, if you take a look at the pictures and the images around the word line, you'll see that lines are not always straight. They can be straight, they can be zigzagged, they can be wavy, swirly, they can even turn into different shapes and be dotted. So lines are not always straight. If you take a look at the right side of your screen, there are different types of patterns. Patterns are made when we repeat a line over and over again. Patterns are also made when we repeat shapes or colors or designs over and over again. Remember, patterns are also a principle of design. The main principle of design that we're going to be focusing on is emphasis. When we emphasize something or when we see emphasis in an artwork, this is where an area or an object within the actual artwork draws the attention of the viewer and becomes the focal point of the artwork. So if you take a look at these two artworks on your screen, you'll see that the emphasis point or the focal point is in the center off a little bit of the artwork. Remember, we create emphasis by adding a center of interest or a focal point. If you take a look at these two artworks, you'll see that one, they definitely have lines and patterns, but two, one of them does not have a focal point where the other one does. The one on the left hand side is beautiful and it has great patterns and lines and shapes, but it does not have a focal point. There is no point on that painting or that drawing that draws your eye into the center or into one part of the drawing. Whereas the drawing on the right has a focal point. It's actually right in the middle, which is not always the case, but the artist decided to create emphasis by creating a focal point right in the center of the artwork. The focal point is where our eye gets drawn into a center of interest. What we are going to be doing today is we are going to be making something called a Zentangle design. Our Zentangles are going to have a lot of things. They're going to have lines, shapes, patterns, and most importantly, there has to be some sort of emphasis in your work. If you take a look at my example, you will see that there is emphasis in the left-hand top corner of the artwork. That is the focal point. All around that focal point, I have created different patterns using lines and shapes. And I've created a cohesive work that has, as I said, a focal point and lines. You are going to be expected to do the same. Let's take a look at this video, which shows a time lapse of an artist creating their Zentangle art. We are going to be creating our emphasis and line drawing. After planning and researching different Zentangles or patterns we want to create, we are going to start by creating our focal point. Remember, our focal point does not have to be in the center of the paper. You should be doing this with pencil first. After you create the spot where your focal point is going and add the basic layout of your design, you can then take a Sharpie marker, any color is fine, or multiple colors, it's really up to you, and you can start to apply lines, shapes, and other colors in order to create patterns. Make sure that your patterns are dense. What I mean by that is that you want to make sure that these patterns take up the entire space of your paper. And you also want to make sure that they are full and bold. You don't want to see a lot of your white paper mark underneath your patterns or through your patterns. Let's take a look at how the artist continues to create her Zentangle drawing that incorporates both a focal point and emphasis. And it also incorporates lines and shapes. So after watching that video, we saw how we can create our own Zentangle design with emphasis. In order to begin this project, let's start with step one, research. What you're going to do is you're going to inspire yourselves by looking up different images of Zentangles. You can Google the word Zentangles, and then I want you to copy some of the patterns that you like into your sketchbook and start to think about if you can incorporate them into your future design. After we are done with that, it is then time to brainstorm. Start planning your design. You don't need to sketch out your entire design, just the main layout concept. Think about where you're going to position your focal point, and then think about also what Zentangles you're going to be using from step one. Step three is your focal point plan. So start first with your focal point because remember, emphasis is the most important part of this piece. Your focal point should be contrasted to the rest of the design and or the rest of the design should lead the viewer's eye to it. Start with the focal point either in the center, off to the side, down below, it doesn't matter. And then mark the main layout shapes or areas. Step four is starting to add your patterns. After you created your focal point and the basic layout of your artwork, it is then time to add patterns in order to fill the entire piece of paper. Start with bigger shapes, then fill in the gaps with smaller, more intricate elements such as lines and shapes, etc. For the most part, draw as you feel. Lines and shapes can be mostly curvy and organic, or angled and geometric, or a combination of both. It's all about the mood and emotion you want to share. So, for example, if you are feeling happy and go lucky, you can add lines that are very whimsical and they're very curvy. If you're feeling angry or annoyed, adding lines that are sharp and dense are very, very effective for that. On your screen here, I have a few extra pattern designs if you need to get inspired. Remember, this project is going to take us a bit of time, so make sure that you plan what you're going to draw before you start drawing on your final draft. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I am looking forward to seeing your artwork.